The snow had already started falling heavily in the tiny town of Redwood Pines by the time Seth Callahan turned off the highway. It was just past 7 p.m., but the thick curtain of snow made it feel like the dead of night. The glow from his headlights lit up the unplowed road ahead, creating the illusion of a tunnel of white, endless and quiet. He tightened his grip on the steering wheel, feeling the tires struggle to keep traction as he navigated the winding roads through the woods. Seth wasn't new to winter in the Northeast, but this storm was different. There was a pressure in the air, a stillness that felt more ominous than peaceful. Seth was heading to an old family cabin tucked deep in the forest, a place he hadn't visited since he was a teenager. His uncle had passed away the month before and left him the cabin in his will. It seemed like a good place to disappear for a few days and get some writing done. Maybe even deal with the nightmares that had started creeping back into his sleep. But the moment he pulled up to the cabin, something felt off. The porch light was flickering despite no one being here for weeks. The door looked like it had been opened recently, and there, in the snow, were footprints leading around the back of the house. Oddly, they only led in one direction. Seth grabbed his flashlight and approached cautiously. He called out, "Hello?" But only the wind responded, pushing snowflakes sideways and causing the trees to groan. He followed the prints to the back, heart thudding, and found something that made him stop cold. There was a second set of prints now, smaller, barefoot, and they were fresh. The snow hadn't covered them yet. He whipped around, shining the light in every direction. Nothing, just woods and snow and silence. He rushed inside, locked the door, and drew the curtains. The power was still working, thankfully. The heating creaked on, and the place began to warm up. He tried to rationalize it. Maybe some local kid playing a prank. Maybe a hiker who got lost. But something didn't add up. Who walks barefoot through the snow? That night, Seth tried to sleep, but the sound of something tapping on the window kept jolting him awake. At first, he thought it was branches. Then he saw the condensation on the glass, and the shape of a handprint slowly forming. It was small, too small to be his. He froze, too terrified to move. The hand slid down the glass, as though someone was watching him from the other side. When he finally dared to look, there was no one there, just a print. The next morning, he found the same barefoot tracks, circling the cabin again, this time in both directions. That's when he decided to drive into town and talk to someone. Maybe the sheriff, maybe a neighbor, someone who could give him answers. But the snow had piled so high overnight that his car was completely buried. No cell service. No signal on the radio. It was like the storm had swallowed him whole. Seth wasn't the only one in town experiencing strange things during the storm. In another part of Redwood Pines, a woman named Jessica Miller was spending her first winter alone in the house her grandparents left her. She had grown up hearing stories about the woods being haunted, old logging accidents, people vanishing in blizzards, shadows seen in the trees. She always chalked it up to small-town folklore, the kind people pass around with cocoa and fireplace crackles. But after her first week in the cabin, she wasn't so sure anymore. Her dog, Moose, a massive Bernese mountain dog, had started acting weird. He would stare at the back door for hours, growling lowly, ears pinned back. He refused to go outside at night, which was unusual for him. One evening, Jessica followed his gaze and saw what looked like a figure standing at the tree line. Tall, still, almost like it was carved from ice. She blinked, and it was gone. She told herself it was a trick of the light, maybe her imagination, but Moose wouldn't calm down for hours after. That night, she heard footsteps crunching in the snow. Slow, deliberate. She turned off all the lights and watched from the second-story window. There was someone walking through her yard. But what disturbed her most was how the figure moved. It didn't seem to sink into the snow. No trail followed. Just movement, then stillness. Then it turned and looked directly up at her window. Even from that distance, she could tell its eyes were all wrong. Pale, almost glowing, and wide, too wide. Jessica called the sheriff the next morning. Deputy Reed arrived a few hours later, his cruiser struggling up the snowy road. He listened carefully to everything she said, nodding along, then finally said, "You're not the first to report something like this. Last year, we had 2 folks go missing during a storm just like this one. They found their boots, coats, and flashlights abandoned in the woods. No tracks leading away. It's like the snow swallowed them whole. Jessica stared at him. Are you saying it's supernatural? I'm saying, he replied, that the forest doesn't like to be disturbed in winter. Meanwhile, Seth had begun seeing things in the mirror, reflections that didn't belong to him, shadows moving behind him that weren't there when he turned around. One night, as he brushed his teeth, he noticed a fog forming on the mirror that looked like writing. Slowly, one word etched itself into steam. Run. That same night, the lights flickered out. The heater groaned and died. Seth lit a fire and sat close, wrapped in blankets. He could hear something moving outside the cabin. Slow, dragging footsteps circling again and again. At one point, it stopped right outside the front door. Then a knock. 3 times. He didn't answer. He just sat there, holding his breath. Then a voice. It sounded like a child. I'm cold. Let me in. He didn't move. I can see you. Still he didn't move. Then something slammed against the door hard enough to rattle the hinges. Seth jumped up and ran upstairs, locking himself in the bedroom. He waited all night, wide-eyed, gripping a fireplace poker. When morning came, he crept downstairs and found the front door slightly ajar. Snow had blown inside, but there were no tracks leading away. Jessica was dealing with her own horrors. The following evening, she found strange symbols carved into the bark of the trees surrounding her cabin. At first, she thought it might be kids, but the symbols were too old, too intricate, like something from a language no one spoke anymore. She took pictures and tried researching them online, but nothing matched. That's when she remembered the old journal in her attic, her grandfather's. She found it buried in a trunk beneath moth-eaten quilts and broken frames. In it, he had written about the Watchers of Winter, spirits or creatures that guarded the land during the coldest months. According to him, they weren't evil, but they didn't like trespassers, especially ones who stayed past the first snowfall. He mentioned a ritual, a way to show respect, to ask permission to stay. A bowl of milk and bread left on the porch. A fire kept burning all night. Silence after sunset. Jessica hadn't done any of those things. The final entry in the journal read, I saw her again. The pale woman in the snow. She has no face. Only eyes. She's getting closer. The power went out that night. Jessica bundled up and prepared to leave at first light. But when she stepped outside, her car was gone. Not buried. Gone. The snow was undisturbed where it had once been. No tracks. No evidence it had ever existed. And in the snow near the front steps were bare footprints. Tiny, like a child's. Jessica didn't scream. She wanted to. But her body froze in place, her breath fogging the cold air as she stared at those bare footprints in the snow. Something inside her told her not to move, not to speak. Just listen. The wind had died down, and for a moment, it was so quiet she could hear the snow settling on the roof above her. Moose, her dog, stood stiff beside her, a low growl vibrating in his chest. Then she heard it. A laugh, not playful or sweet. A short, sharp laugh in the trees, too high-pitched to belong to any adult. It came again, closer this time, followed by the sound of snow crunching under small feet. She slowly backed toward the door and whispered for Moose to follow. As she reached the threshold, the temperature seemed to drop 10 more degrees. She could see her breath hanging in the air like smoke. The sound of crunching footsteps was now at the edge of her porch, even though she saw no one there. Then the front porch light flickered and died. She slammed the door shut, locked it, and shoved a heavy chair beneath the knob. Jessica had always thought herself as tough, independent. But now she felt like a child again, hiding under her blanket from monsters she'd never believed in until this moment. Back at the other end of town, Seth wasn't faring any better. He hadn't slept in 2 nights. The firewood was running low, and the cabin's generator had finally sputtered out. He was running purely on adrenaline and fear. He tried staying busy, scribbling notes in his journal, recording every strange occurrence, every sighting and sound. But the strangest thing happened that afternoon. A knock at the door. not slow or deliberate like before, but rapid and panicked. He approached carefully, poker in hand, and asked who it was. A man's voice responded. "I'm with the county search and rescue. We got a distress call ping from this location. Are you okay in there?" Seth hesitated. The man sounded normal enough. Human. Desperate, even. "I'm okay," Seth called back. "Are you alone?" "Yes," came the voice. "But I need to get you out of here. Storm's going to get worse tonight." Still not convinced, Seth looked through the peephole. The man stood there, bundled up, goggles on, heavy coat dusted in snow. He looked like a rescue worker. But something was off. Seth couldn't put his finger on it until the man turned slightly, and Seth noticed that he wasn't standing in the snow. There were no footprints behind him. No disturbed snow where he'd walked up the stairs. Seth backed away from the door. "I'm not going anywhere," he said through gritted teeth. The man didn't move at first. Then he turned back toward the door and pressed his forehead to it, slowly tapping against the wood, again and again, muttering something. Seth strained to hear. The words made his stomach twist. "You never should have come back. You never should have come back. You never should have come back." Then he was gone. Jessica tried to contact the sheriff again the next morning using her landline, but it was dead. She tried hiking toward the neighbor's place a few miles downhill, but something kept turning her around. The trees seemed to shift. No matter how far she walked, she ended up back near her cabin. She marked the tree with her scarf, only to find it again minutes later, even after walking in a straight line. It was like the forest was playing with her, or maybe trying to trap her. When she got back, her front door was wide open. She was sure she'd locked it. Moose barked and bolted inside ahead of her. She followed, heart pounding. Everything inside looked untouched, except for one thing. On the kitchen table, someone had placed a child's mitten, blue with white snowflakes. The fabric was frozen stiff. She didn't own any children's clothing. She built a fire, barricaded the door, and sat down to read more of her grandfather's journal. She found a page she hadn't noticed before, one tucked between the back cover and a loose sheet. It had only 2 lines, written in frantic handwriting. "If you see the girl, don't speak to her. Don't let her in. And for God's sake, don't follow her." That night, Jessica had a dream. In it, she stood outside in the snow, barefoot, staring at the tree line. She wasn't cold. She felt nothing. A little girl in a nightgown stood across from her, eyes black and lips cracked from the cold. The girl smiled and whispered, "I'm lost. Help me find my home." Jessica woke with a gasp, drenched in sweat, Moose barking like mad at the window. She threw off the blanket, grabbed her flashlight, and looked outside. Her breath caught. There she was, the girl from her dream. She was standing by the tree line, dress torn and fingers blue. Her lips moved, mouthing the same words. "I'm lost. Help me find my home." Jessica backed away from the window. Moose barked louder, angrier. When she looked back, the girl was gone. But the bare footprints were there again, now leading toward the back door. Miles away, Seth had decided to leave the cabin. He packed what little he could carry, bundled himself up, and set out on foot down the road. The snow had let up slightly, enough to make walking possible, but it was still slow going. As he passed the trees, he kept thinking he saw things. People moving just behind the trunks, heads peeking out, ducking away when he turned. Once or twice he heard laughter again, and then the cries. "Help me," someone called. It was a woman's voice. Faint, broken. He stopped. "Who's there?" No answer. He pressed forward, ignoring the growing sense of dread clawing at his chest. The road curved around a slope, and he saw something ahead, a truck half buried in snow, its engine still lightly smoking. He ran toward it and found the driver's door hanging open. There was no one inside, but the keys were still in the ignition. Snow had begun covering the seat. That's when he heard it again. "Help me, it's so cold," from the woods. He turned slowly and saw a figure stumbling out, a woman wearing jeans and a flannel shirt, her hair wet and frozen. She looked directly at him. "Please, my husband is lost. We need help." Seth looked back at the truck. The seat hadn't been used in hours. No footsteps led to the woods from the truck, only away from it. Still, he felt drawn to her. He took one step forward, then stopped. Her expression changed, ever so slightly. Her eyes widened, her mouth twitched upward, like a puppet whose strings have been yanked too hard. Her jaw opened, wider than it should have, and she screamed a noise that didn't belong to anything human. Seth bolted, stumbling into the snow. He ran down the slope, blindly pushing through the thick drifts, ignoring the branches whipping his face. Behind him, he could hear the crunching of snow as something chased him. Fast, unnaturally fast. He made it to a creek and dove across, landing hard on the other side. He looked back, heart pounding, but there was nothing. Just snow, and trees, and silence. Jessica, meanwhile, had made a choice. She remembered something else in her grandfather's journal, a mention of an old ranger station deep in the woods that used to have a working radio. If she could get there, maybe she could call for help. With Moose at her side, she left at dawn. The woods were colder than ever. She moved fast, marking her trail with red fabric strips and memorizing landmarks. But as the day wore on, she realized she wasn't alone. There were others in the trees. She never saw them fully, just shadows moving too quickly, faces peeking out from behind branches. At one point, she turned and saw herself, an exact replica, standing 20 feet away, staring silently. The other Jessica didn't blink, didn't breathe. Then she turned and walked into the trees. Jessica didn't follow. She ran. Just before sunset, she reached the ranger station. It was a small building, half collapsed, with a rusted sign and snow covering its roof. She forced the door open and called out. No one answered, but inside, she found the old radio still intact. She turned the knobs, praying it still worked, and heard static, then a voice. It was faint but real. This is Ranger Post 4. Identify yourself. Jessica nearly cried with relief. My name is Jessica Miller. I'm stuck in Redwood Pines. There's something in the woods. I think I'm being followed. There was a pause. Then the voice replied, We know. We're coming. Don't leave the station. Don't talk to anyone else. Then the signal died. Outside, the wind began howling. Jessica stayed huddled inside the ranger station with Moose curled tightly against her side. The cold was unbearable. There was no wood for a fire, only some broken furniture and an old filing cabinet. She broke one of the chairs into pieces, shoved it into the fireplace, and used a match to spark a flame. The fire crackled weakly, but it was something. Outside, the snow had begun falling again in thick, heavy sheets, blanketing the station and muting every sound. The wind whistled through cracks in the walls, and each gust seemed to carry voices, faint, echoing, always just out of clarity. She checked the radio again, hoping to reconnect with a ranger who had answered her. Nothing but static now. Every once in a while, she thought she heard breathing in the background of the signal. Once, she heard her own name whispered in the static. Her heart beat faster each time the sound came. At one point, she thought she heard knocking on the wall. Not the door, the wall. Then the knocking came again, this time on the opposite side. It was circling the building. Slow, rhythmic, 3 knocks. Pause. Then again. Moose let out a low, uncertain growl. The fire sputtered, dimmed. Jessica pressed her hand to his side to calm him and whispered, It's okay, boy. But she didn't believe it. Elsewhere, Seth had taken refuge in a hunter's lean-to. He stumbled across near the base of a frozen ridge. It wasn't much, just a wooden roof, a few beams, and an old fire pit buried under snow. He was exhausted. His legs ached, and the frostbite on his fingers had turned his skin pale and stiff. He tried starting a fire with the emergency flares from his backpack, and after 3 failed tries, one finally sparked to life. The light and heat gave him brief comfort. He took out his notebook and jotted down his thoughts. His hand shook as he wrote, They're following me, watching from the trees. Every time I look, they're gone, but I can feel them. The girl in the snow, the man with no eyes, the one that looks like me. They want me to stay. They want me to freeze. He closed the notebook and stared at the fire. A branch snapped behind him. Then another. He grabbed the flare and stood, heart thudding, in the flickering light. He saw something watching him from the trees, a man-shaped shadow with no features, just standing, still, motionless. He raised the flare higher and took a step toward it. The thing took a step back, then vanished behind a tree. Another branch snapped behind him. Now there were two, maybe three. He didn't run. He couldn't. He just sat beside the fire and waited. Back at the ranger station, Jessica kept the fire going through the night. She managed to find an old cot and wrapped herself in blankets. Moose wouldn't stop pacing. Every time he passed a window, he growled. Just after 2 a.m., the temperature dropped so suddenly that the fire dimmed even with wood in it. Ice began to form on the inside of the windows. Jessica sat up and stared at the frost creeping along the glass. Then she saw them, faces, dozens of them, pressed against the glass from outside. All blank, all watching, all smiling. One face didn't smile. It was her own. Jessica gasped and backed away. The glass fogged suddenly, and words appeared in the frost. "Let her in." She screamed and ran to the back of the station, pulling Moose with her and locking the supply room door. Outside, something began scratching at the walls. Not violently, slowly, deliberately. It circled the building again, pausing at the corners. Then she heard it, the voice of a little girl. "I'm so cold. Please, please open the door." Jessica covered her ears. "I promise, I won't stay long." Then came the knocking again, this time from inside the supply closet. Seth woke the next morning to find the fire dead and ash covering the snow around him. His lips were cracked, his fingers burned. He knew he had to keep moving. He saw a radio tower in the distance, barely visible through the fog, and forced himself forward one step at a time. He passed old cabins, abandoned snowmobiles, and once what looked like a pair of snowshoes stuck upright in the snow, but no body beneath them, just the shoes. As he reached the base of the tower, he heard laughter again, that same childlike giggle echoing all around. But this time it was followed by another sound, static, a voice, a real voice. From the tower, he climbed the rusted metal, hands burning with cold, and found the transmitter still on. He grabbed the mic and shouted, "Hello? This is Seth Callahan. I need help. Anyone out there?" Static, then a reply. "This is Ranger Post 4. We're inbound to your location. Stay where you are. Don't speak to anyone else." The same voice Jessica had heard. The same warning. He stayed at the tower until nightfall, hoping for rescue. As the sky turned orange, then purple, then deep gray, the wind picked up. He saw figures at the edge of the trees again. They didn't move. They just stood there, surrounding the clearing. He kept the fire going and stared at them. One of them stepped forward. It looked like his mother. She died years ago, but there she was. Same coat, same smile. "Seth," she said gently, "come home." He didn't speak, just shook his head. She took another step forward. "You're so cold. I can help." He closed his eyes. When he opened them again, she was gone, but the footprints remained. At the ranger station, Jessica began hearing a helicopter. Moose barked and jumped up the window, tail wagging. The sound grew louder, unmistakable. She ran outside, waving her arms. Snow swirled around her face. She saw the light, the black silhouette of the chopper above. Then it vanished, just like that. No fading, no flying away. It blinked out of existence. She collapsed to her knees, sobbing. Then she heard someone approach. She turned, ready to run, but stopped. It was Seth. He looked like he'd been through hell, frostbitten fingers, sunken eyes. But he was alive. "How did you find this place?" she asked. "I followed the tower," he said. "Saw your chimney smoke. I thought I was hallucinating." They went back inside together. Neither asked too many questions. They just sat near the fire, warming their hands, sharing food. Moose curled beside them, finally calm. After long silence, Jessica said, "They're not people, not really. They wear faces. They pretend. But they're not us." Seth nodded. "They want us to join them." She looked at him. We're not going to, right? He gave a tired smile. Not if we can help it. Just before dawn, headlights cut through the snow. A snowplow, followed by 2 snowmobiles and a rescue team. Real voices, real people. Jessica and Seth stumbled outside, waving, crying, shouting. The rescue team rushed toward them, throwing blankets over their shoulders, checking vitals. The lead ranger, a man named Thomas, asked how they survived. Jessica told him everything. He didn't laugh. He didn't look skeptical. He just nodded and said, "You're lucky. Most don't make it out." They were driven to town, given hot meals and warm beds, surrounded by real people in a real building. For a while, it felt safe. But 2 days later, Seth looked out the window of the hospital and saw her, the girl, standing in the snow, smiling. And he realized something. The storm hadn't stopped. It was just beginning again.